Hey guys, before we get started, I just want to say a big thank you to my Patreons. If you would like to join my Patreon, the link is in the description below. But anyways, welcome to part 2 of our plane crash tutorial. In part 1, we focus on the animation of the plane and getting everything camera tracked to our actual footage. But in today, we're actually going to be adding the explosion and also some masking and final compositing. This is the result we were left with the last tutorial. We can see that the plane comes in, it kind of wobbles a little bit, and then goes into the ground like that, so that is looking good. And then also if we come into the camera right here, we can also see that our camera is tracked correctly and follows our plane. So first things first, let's go ahead and import our explosions in. Now you can actually import free explosions off of django-fx.com. These guys are awesome with free VDBs. They have a few select free VDBs, and they also have their own engine called the Embergen engine, which is really good at real-time flame effects and smoke effects and everything, so definitely check them out. For our purpose today, we're just going to download some of their free VDB sequences. So let's go to the downloads folder up here and then free VDB examples. So down here we can see all the examples that they have free. So we're going to go ahead and download this mid-air explosion. You can just hit the download button. And then also we're going to go ahead and download this building implosion. So once you have the two files downloaded on your computer, you should have these RAR files. Now you will need something like WinRAR or 7-zip to actually open these up. I'm just going to create two folders right now. One is going to be mid-air, and the other one is going to be, I'm just going to call mine smoke. So let's go ahead and open up the mid-air explosion. You'll see that it gives us the license, the README, but also it gives us this little folder which contains all of our sequences. So we're just going to hold Control, hit A to select all these, and then just move it over to our new folder. Then we're just going to do the same thing with the building implosion. Just going to come over here, open this up, go ahead and Control A, select all those, and then put it in our new folder. So once we have that, we can actually go ahead and import the explosions into Blender itself. Now you do need to be on 2.9 or higher to actually import these in. This is kind of a newish feature in Blender. We're going to hit Shift A to add. We're going to go to Volume down here and then Import Open VDB. And then we're just going to locate wherever we saved our files. I'm going to do the smoke VDB sequence first. So we're just going to come in here, hit A to select all these, and then Import Open VDB. So now if we scroll out, we can actually see that it has imported our VDB. It is way too large, so what we can actually do is you can't really select the VDB in the viewport like this, so what you have to do is come up here and actually select it in this. So we're just going to scale this down how you wouldn't usually. We're just going to try to position it wherever the plane actually hits the ground. So let's go see where that is. So for me, the plane hits the ground at 142, so that is where we're going to start the actual smoke. You will see, however, that it has disappeared, and it's actually still there. It just has to do with the frame count that it has. If we scroll back to a previous frame, you can see that it's still there, and that's because earlier we saw that this was only 116 frames, and right now we are on frame 142. An easy fix for that is to just select your little smoke object up here, come to the new object data properties section, and then we can see that the frames are 116, but we can also see there's a start frame right here, and so I just want to set this to one frame less than whatever we had it before. So 142 was what we had it before, so we are gonna set it to 141. So now let's come back here and see how it looks. We can see that the smoke actually starts a little bit later. So let's actually set our start frame to be a little bit later. You can kind of just play around with this. Okay, so now we can actually see that our smoke is on these correct frames. So let's come to where it's going to hit. We can see that it's kind of off center right now. So we're just going to hit G to move it, and then X in the X axis. So we can see that it's actually below the floor right now, so we don't want that. We're just going to hit G, then Z to move it up in the Z axis. So that is looking good. We want to make sure that a little bit's poking out on the bottom, but let's scroll back and see how this looks like. Okay, so that is looking good. Now let's go ahead and import our other explosion. This is going to be the actual fireball that kind of emanates from the actual plane. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, we're just going to hit Shift A to add in a volume, import VDB. Then we're just going to go to wherever we saved ours. Mine is here. Select A to select all these, and then import open VDB. And then down here you'll notice that we don't have anything else in the scene. That's actually because the the thing is on the previous frame, so we need to scroll back a bit, and now you can see it. Again, it is way too large, so we're just going to scale this down to however we like it. Again, the explosion is actually starting on a frame 1, and we don't really want that, so we're just going to come up here, make sure we have that selected, and then in this section we can just set the start to be the same as our previous start, which mine was 140. Okay, so now let's come out to a later frame just so we can see kind of the explosion. We can't really see it that well, so what I'm going to do is come over here to our building implosion, just going to hide that from our view for now. And then you can actually see that it's not positioned correctly. So let's select that, and then we're actually going to rotate it on the z-axis 180 degrees just so it's the right direction. And again, we want to see where our impact point is. It's around here. So we just want to select this little ball and then position it there, kind of on our point of impact. So now that is looking correct. However, you will see that our actual smoke and everything, most of it is actually in our ground. So what I'm going to do is going to go ahead and rotate it on the X, just rotate this up a bit, and now we actually have to reposition this because it's been rotated out of place. So once we reposition it right here, let's see how this looks. So that is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and bring back our building implosion back in just so we can see how it looks. So this is looking pretty good. However, if I come to our one of our first frames that the explosion spawns in, you'll see this big ball of flames and everything, and we don't really want that to be seen. It's kind of one of these things about this VDB sequence in particular. Just the starting keyframe is basically just a ball of fire, and that doesn't really look that realistic. So what we can do is actually keyframe this a bit, so we know. Let's find the first frame where it actually looks good. I'm going to say this frame right here. Just going to hit I, then location, like that. I'm also going to set a location, rotation, and scale because we will be messing around with some of those. Now let's go back to our first frame where the ball is actually formed. Let's go ahead and scale that down a lot, just so it's very tiny, like that. And then again, we have to position it where it was. So right at the point of impact right there. So now we can just hit another location, rotation, and scale like that. Let's see how this is looking. So it still gets big too quickly, so I'm just going to come in the middle right here, scale it down again, and then position it at the point of impact one more time. Again, just going to hit I for location, rotation, scale. So if I just scrub throughout this, we can see that it starts out small, not really as noticeable as it was before, and then it grows to be the bigger size, and then it gets positioned where we want it, which is the actual big explosion, and that is looking good. So now let's actually worry about rendering this out. So let's go ahead and hop into rendered view. You will notice that there is a black kind of blob here that doesn't look too good. That is actually because we are in EV instead of cycles, so let's just switch that over. We want a GPU compute. I'm going to set mine to 32, adaptive sampling, denoising, yes, light paths, let's just set all these down to 3 for now. And then we do want motion blur. We can go ahead and set this to transparent. And then in the performance, since I'm rendering on a GPU, I'm going to set it to 512 by 512 for my tile size. And finally, down here, you want to make sure that your color management is actually on filmic instead of standard. Now that we have all that out of the way, you will still notice that our smoke is looking very weird, and that is actually because we don't have any materials on it. Before we do that, however, let's go ahead and add in some lighting for our scene. Gonna go up to the shading tab, gonna go into world. I'm just gonna add a quick HDRI I downloaded off of HDRI Haven. This is a snowy HDRI because it matches my scene pretty well. So with the HDRI applied, we can actually see that our lighting is looking a lot better and closer to our actual footage. Okay, so now let's actually get into some shading of these explosions. We're going to come and do the building implosion first. So we're just going to select that up there. Go to object instead of world. We're going to come over here, add a new material. Okay, so once we add a new material, it went ahead and added a principal volume to our material output, and that is actually what we want. So for the building implosion, all we want to do is just to increase the density a bit to a 2.5. I think that looks good. You do want to make sure your density attribute is set to density. You can actually check which attributes a actual VDB sequence has by coming to this section and then checking this little section up here. We can see that it says density. Okay, next for our actual main explosion, this is the interesting part. Let's actually select this up here. We're going to go ahead and hit another new material, but this time let's actually play around with a little bit more settings. We're going to keep the density on 1. You can actually see it has a density output, so this is correct right here. Then if we come down here, we have some other options: the black body intensity, the temperature, and the temperature attribute. So black body intensity is basically for flames and everything, how much light it actually emits, and the color it kind of has. So let's just go ahead and set the black body intensity up to 10, like that. And also the temperature that affects kind of the coloring and the amount of actual flames that are in the scene. So I'm just going to set mine to 2000. And then if we come down to the temperature attribute, we can see that temperature is here, and we also have a temperature attribute up here. So all that is looking good. Now for the moment of truth, let's actually go ahead and set it to render to see how this looks. Okay, so that is looking pretty good. I actually like my explosions to be a little bit darker, so we're just going to come to this color section and set these down to be both a little bit darker, just to make the actual smoke darker. Okay, so now that is looking really good. Let's come back out to layout because we are now done with the materials and take a look at it. Okay, so everything is looking pretty good now. Let's scrub out to see kind of nearer to the point of impact, just to make sure that all that is looking good. So we can kind of see that the plane is producing some smoke once it hits the ground, and then all of a sudden it just lights up in a ball of fire, which is looking good, and then kind of emanates from that. So I think that looks good. You can play around with the explosion, maybe add some other fire effects and everything, but for me this is good. Now we actually have to render out this little animation, but we only want the foreground with our actual 3D objects and not the background. So what we can do is come to compositing. We can notice all this mess which was set up by Blender when we did the 3D tracking. So we can just delete all these nodes right here. We don't really need these, and then we're just going to plug this movie clip into this image socket, and then kind of bring up this render layers here. We also want to add a bit of denoising to our scene. So what we can do is come over to the view layer properties, go over to this denoising tab, click that, and then we can add a quick denoise node, plug the noisy image to image, normal to normal, and then the albedo to the albedo. And then finally you want to plug this image socket up into this alpha over node like that. Now this will actually put our movie clip below our render layers, and we actually don't want that for this case. So what we're going to do is plug this denoise up to this composite node. And now let's go ahead and render out an image. Let's go to layout, select a good frame that we want to render out. I'm going to select this frame right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and render an image. Okay, so this is the result I got. If for any reason your actual rendering fails, that is actually because you have the rendered view turned on, so you want to turn that off before you render an image. If it still fails, just save the project, restart Blender, and come back into it, and it should work. So I was happy with that result, so I know I want to go ahead and start to actually render out our scenes. So I'm going to come down here to our output properties. I'm going to make sure that everything is correct, our resolution and frame rate, which they are, so that is good. I'm going to go ahead and set our end keyframe to be 250, just to save on some render time. Now in this output section we can actually output our footage, so we want to actually create a new folder. Because we are going to be rendering in a PNG sequence, so there are going to be lots of images. So we can actually come, we're going to go ahead and make a new folder. I'm going to name mine image sequence final, like that. Just going to open that up, hit accept because Blender will automatically name it. We have PNG, RGBA, which is very important, and then the compression down to 0, and that is all of the export settings. Finally, we just want to come back up to the render properties, make sure that motion blur is selected, and make sure we are on Filmic. Again, this is very important to make it look good. I'm rendering on 32 samples, but if you want more sample count, feel free to increase that. Now let's go ahead and start rendering our animation. Okay guys, so here is the result that we got from our render. You can see that it does have a transparent background. That is what we want, and the explosion is looking pretty good. So I'm ready to move on to the masking. So basically masking is going to cut out this tree right here so that our plane and explosion actually go behind the tree and make it look like it's actually in the scene. Before we do that though, let's go ahead and get some more compositing finished. We're just going to go ahead and delete our render layers and denoise node, because we don't need that anymore. Now we just need to add a image node. This is gonna import all of our images that we just had. So we're just gonna select all those, open the image. You can see that it automatically makes a image sequence right here. So we're just gonna go back to the first frame, plug the image into the alpha over image, and then plug this both into the viewer and the composite node. Let's just go ahead and give that a quick little view. Okay, so this is what it looks like by default with these two plugged in. First of all, you will notice that the colors are kind of off, and so to change that, we're going to go to the render properties, go to color management, and set it back to standard. So that is looking a little bit better, but now you can see that there's some white around the actual explosion. And to correct that, all we got to do is hit this convert to pre-multiply. Now that we have both of those finished, we can actually come out to wherever the plane is supposed to pass through our actual tree. So you'll notice right here that the plane is supposed to only be seen in this little crack here, but it's actually on top of our tree, and so we don't really want that, so now we have to do some masking. To do masking, let's go to our layout tab. We're going to go to the movie clip editor, and then we're just going to open up our little movie clip in the background just so we have some reference. You'll notice all of our tracking markers, and we actually don't need those now, so I'm just going to go ahead and hide all of them. And then up here, instead of tracking, we're going to do mask. And so for masking, we need to find out where we actually need to mask. And so let's go ahead and bring out another window over here. Let's go to the 3D viewport. And then we can just go into our camera. And basically we need to find where the plane is going to enter this kind of area over here and where it's going to exit this area. Also, we need to know if the explosion is actually going to be masked out by this tree as well. So let's come over here and see that real quick. Okay, so for me, the plane gets right around the tree around 92 frames. So basically, we don't have to worry about the mask before this number. We only have to worry about masking out the plane and everything after frame 92. So now that we know that information, we can just push that window over to the side and start masking. So creating a mask is about the same process as camera tracking. All you need to do is hold Control and then click. And basically, we're just going to follow the rough outline of the tree. It doesn't have to be as precise just because this is going to be so fast, but if we did have the plane going a bit slower and stuff, we would want to spend as much time masking it, this tree out as possible. So again, I am basically just holding Control and clicking throughout the tree, trying to get all the trunk information and everything. Okay, so I have outlined the whole tree now. I'm actually right at the end right here, and so to connect these back up, all we can do is hold Alt and then press C, and that'll connect up the mask. Now we will notice if we scrub throughout the clip, the mask kind of goes off of the tree, and so there are many ways that we can actually make the mask stick onto the tree. We can either rotoscope it and manually place the markers on the tree. But since we already have some tracking markers on the tree, we can actually parent the mask to the tracking markers. So let's just come back to the tracking section. Let's Alt-H to unhide all of our markers. Let's hit Alt-D to hide all the ones that aren't in the scene right now. So we actually have some on the tree itself. If we scrub throughout this clip, we can see that it is in fact stuck onto the tree at that point. So that is actually a really good marker that we can use. So let's come back to frame 92. And now let's go back into the masking section. We're going to go ahead and hit A to select all the points in our mask. And then we're just going to select whatever point that we want on the tree to parent the mask to. So we're just going to select this, and then we're going to hit Control P to parent. And now let's scrub throughout our clip and see that the mask actually sticks to that point pretty well. Now that we have the mask parented to the actual tracking markers, I'm going to go ahead and go back to tracking and just remove all these so we can actually focus on the mask. So if we scrub throughout our clip, we can actually see that the mask follows the tree pretty well in the first part, but towards the end it kind of goes off. So we actually need to keyframe the mask and do some rotoscoping. And so that is a straightforward process. All we have to do is come to a part where the actual mask isn't parented to the tree anymore. Let's just go ahead and select this point. Then we're just going to hit G to actually move, and then hit I to add a keyframe right there. So we just want to come throughout our clip and see a keyframe where the actual mask is no longer parented to the tree like this, and then we can just select all these points by holding shift and clicking these, and we can actually go ahead and move those back to the actual tree. So again, just hit G and move them over like that. We actually didn't select some of these down here. You got to be careful because it might select the actual little dot down there instead of the actual marker. So again, G to move those over. It doesn't have to be perfect for our sake. We're just trying to get it as best as possible. Okay, so now that I have all my markers in the right location, I'm just going to hit A to select all of those and then set I to set a keyframe. Next, I'm going to come throughout the clip a little bit further, and again, it kind of goes off a bit. And basically I'm just going to continue doing this process until throughout the whole clip all the markers actually track to the tree. Okay, so I went throughout the clip and put all the markers on the tree throughout it. Now let's actually come back to the compositing section. Now that we have that, we want to actually add in our mask, so we're just going to go ahead and add in the mask node right here. And then we just want to select our mask. This is the only mask we made. Let's just go ahead and plug that into the factor of our alpha over node, and let's see what that does. So if we kind of zoom into the actual render right here, we can see that the actual plane is being on the tree instead of not on the tree. So that is actually the wrong effect that we want. So to easily change that, we can just add a invert node to our mask. This basically inverts the mask to where our plane is now on the outside and then the tree is covered up. So let's just quickly check how well our mask is by just going out throughout some keyframes and waiting when the compositing is done to see that it looks good. So I basically checked throughout my clip to see if the mask was good, and it was up until the ending. You can kind of see some artifacts right here. And that is because our mask isn't actually tracked perfectly in this section. So you always just want to make sure that you check that, and to fix that, all you have to do is just come back and do the same thing that we were doing before and position those points onto the tree a little bit better. Okay, so I refined my mask a little bit to make it look a little bit better, but you will notice there is still a very sharp edge right here. And what I actually like to do is add in a blur node just right here. Then set that to something like 1 or 2. You don't want it too high because it will look a bit strange. But all that does is basically blur this little edge a little bit. So let me set this up to 2. And yeah, that is looking a lot better. Okay, last thing I'm going to do is to add a bit of color correction because the smoke and fire is looking a little too dark for our scene. So I'm just going to add in a color balance node. Just place that right here on our image sequence, and then basically you can play around with these values. There's not really a great way to do it. You kind of just eyeball it. Okay, so all I had to do for my scene was just up the gamma a bit by erasing this little dot right here, and so I think that is looking good. Okay, so we are now actually ready to render out our final animation. Let's go ahead and check our output properties again. Instead of an image sequence this time, we're actually going to render out a video. So I just named mine Plane Crash Final. We're just going to hit accept right here. And then instead of PNG, we want FFmpeg video. In the encoding section, we want it to set it to MP4. And then the output quality, I'm going to set to high. And so now with everything set up, we are actually ready to render. So let's go ahead and render out our final animation. Okay guys, so this is the final result we got from this tutorial series. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun making it. Also, if you have any other tutorial suggestions, please leave them down in the comment below. Other